Hi everyone, this is Cody, and today we're going to be uppotting some very interesting kinds of plants. So these are Goji Berries, which if you don't know is that kind of a red berry that's usually dried, and they kind of look like raisins, and they usually sell them in like health food stores and stuff. And they're just like a regular berry, but they're very nutritious. They're like a superfood, so they can be pretty expensive. So if you have your own bushes, that could be a huge cost savings. So I've never tried these actually fresh before, like fresh goji berries, but I'm definitely excited to do them. They're relatively fast growing, and they can turn in a few years. They can turn into shrubs that are like 4 to 6 feet high or even higher. And they start out really small. They're actually a member of the nightshade family, believe it or not. So they're like a tomato. They look like little tomato seedlings. They just start out this way, but they're like a huge woody kind of a shrub. So that would be definitely exciting. And these ones are Tomatillos, which are like a tomato, only they have like a kind of a husk around the fruit, and they kind of look like a bit like a Chinese lantern kind of. And the fruits are usually a bit sour, but they can be used to make salsa and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely this is my first time growing them, although I've had the plants before that I've got at my local nursery. But this year I'm just going to try to grow them for myself. They're actually related to golden berries, believe it or not, so I got more of those. I should actually bring those out right now. So these are my golden berries. So like I said, they're in the same family, I guess the same genus actually as these Tomatillos. But they produce much smaller berries. I guess they have a husk around them as well. And I don't know if you've tried golden berries, like they normally sell them at health food stores, and they're another kind of a superfood. Usually sold dried up, like dehydrated. Usually they're sun-dried actually, and they're a nightshade too, just like a tomato. And I guess they can actually cross-pollinate with these Tomatillos. So that is why I started these ones first, quite a bit before, even though these are taller. So I think what will happen is these will flower and fruit before these Tomatillos flower, hopefully, so I don't get a weird hybrid, because I've never really grown both at the same time. Like I haven't actually grown these really before, and I'd like to try them on their own before I do any interbreeding experiments with these fruits. So yeah, so I started these in sand as well, just like these ones. They're just regular washed play sand, and it's excellent medium for starting seeds in. Like it's a sterile medium, so unlike soil, it won't be prone to like rotting and damping off and all that kind of stuff. And when the seeds are starting out, they don't need any nutrients necessarily from the soil, because they get most of their nutrients from like the seed itself. And also, they're pretty easy to water. Like you just set this on a little plate and then bottom water it. And also you can use the sand over and over again. So a lot of these plants that I'm starting in sand, I just kind of reuse them again, and sometimes I would get old seeds that hadn't germinated yet from the last batch germinating in with the new seeds. But this was one of the first ones I did, and I've really been procrastinating potting these, but I think I have to, like right now or as soon as possible, because they can't live in sand forever. And obviously if you want them to grow into nice healthy plants, you need to start giving them nutrients when they become about this size. So these are the golden berries. Here I got some what's called Shanin petunias, and they're actually a wild variety of petunia, and they I think they come from South America, so like places like Ecuador and places like that. And these are a wild variety because most petunias that you grow like from seeds in your regular garden are hybrids. So, but these ones are like the true wild species, and they produce littler flowers that are nice pink color, and they're very beautiful. And I've grown these before with some success. Like, they usually go good in window boxes and stuff like that, but they have to be already established. I found like you can't just really plant the seeds in your window boxes and expect them to grow, so that's why I stored these relatively early indoors. So excited to have these again. They're a very nice looking plant. Might even have some old pictures from my petunias from previous years. I might be able to find them and throw them in, but if not, oh well, sorry about that. And these ones I'm probably the most stoked about. These are passion fruits, or passion flowers. And I saved the original seeds from a store-bought passion fruit. And they took months to germinate, like probably about 2.5 months just to sprout. And I was getting discouraged. Like, I've seen online they can take anywhere between a couple weeks to like a few months. So I wasn't sure if these were actually going to grow. So I started a batch like in early winter that didn't actually sprout, but I probably just didn't wait long enough. So I believe with these ones I soaked the seeds like for 2 days. Like, first I had to get all the pulp off of them, which was pretty tricky. And so I soaked them for like 2 days in water, and then had to scarify the seeds with sandpaper, like really hard, because they're a very tough seed. And they were a little older seeds at that point, so I didn't know if they were going to work. So I basically planted like a whole whack of them in this sand. And just finally, like a couple weeks ago, they just started to sprout. Just a couple of them. Like, there were a few of them. But some of the seeds I see, I don't know if you can see, like this was an actual kind of a seedling at one point that was just starting to sprout. Then it died, and now it's growing mold on him. And there's actually quite a few seeds that are kind of have mold on them. I don't know if you can see very well. But I'm gonna transplant these as soon as possible so they don't succumb to the mold. Like, normally sand is a really good growing medium that's resistant to mold, but in this case it was just the seeds themselves that turned rotten and got moldy, but the sand's all fine. So, so far I can see, oh, maybe this one is actually growing. This one is finally germinating as well, so I might get more than just 3 plants in total, because I'm sure they just take a really long time to germinate. So I figure if I just be more patient and just pick out the moldy ones, maybe I'll get a few more. So I'll be uppotting those out of the sand into real soil so they can actually grow to nice healthy passion flower plants. And just the other day I uppotted these Cucamelons, also from some sand. So if you don't know what Cucamelons are, they are kind of like a cucumber, but they have little fruits that appear to be, they just look like a watermelon, but they don't taste really like a cucumber or a watermelon. They taste kind of sour, kind of like lemons or whatever. And I don't think they're actually a type of cucumber or type of watermelon, but they're the same kind of squash family, I guess. And they're just a very unique kind of plant. Never grown them before, so it should be interesting. So because these passion fruit / passion flower plants are so precious to me, because they were so tricky to actually grow, I'm going to actually wash the containers really well before I plant them in, just a preventative measure for any diseases that could be in those pots. So just in case, because I don't want to go through all that trouble just to have them die. Like, normally I won't wash my pots super well, but in this case I'm definitely going to make sure my pots are washed super well. having it on one of the stronger spray settings just to really kind of get all the old dirt off and stuff. Used to be sunflowers, I guess, but these weren't my pots originally. I was given these, so don't know what kind of possible fungi or diseases would be in the soil in these pots. Don't know the history really behind them. They're probably fine, but want to really make sure because these pots and flowers are so precious to me. With the second one. It's a little warm out today. I think it's a nice day to transplant. Most of these plants were actually, well, all these plants were, all these ones were indoors, just under my grow light. They weren't even in the greenhouse, so I think it's nice to get them a bit acclimatized now. So today I'm going to be using this tropical soil, or tropical plants, but it's good for any plant, but it seems like in this case most of these plants, especially the passionflower and like the petunias and whatever, are for the most part tropical anyways, so I think they'll like the soil a lot, and it's worked good for me for other kinds of plants, so that's what I'll be using. Okay. Looks good to me. Just pat it down a bit. Now we're going to water. So I'm probably just going to have the regular kind of a shower setting with these. Make sure the soil is nice and wet. Just make sure it drains to the bottom of the pots. Pretty good draining soil, I think. Make sure it's actually draining at the bottom. Oh, warm today. Windy, but it's warm. Yeah, that should be good. So when you're transplanting into bigger pots, it's a good idea that your growing medium is like moist, so that it's easier to transplant. You don't want it too dry. I'm just going to bottom water this and let it kind of soak in a bit. Looks like it's going over the top too. Just for a little bit until the sand is completely saturated, and this makes it easier to transplant. There's a chance of transplant shock and all that kind of stuff. And you get more of a root ball, I guess. And the good thing about using sand is it saturates very quickly. It sucks up the water much quicker than soil. So, and it's good to give them a drink before, and a little bit just before you're actually transplanting. When you're doing this in the heat like this, it's kind of important to stay hydrated. Just my homemade ginger ale. It's really good stuff. I can feel the medium is pretty moist, especially on this end. It's probably good to transplant them now. So I'm just going to use a regular spoon. And then gently, well, first I'll actually make my little hole in here. It's big enough to accommodate your whole kind of roots there. And then gently kind of scoop it up like that. See, it's got some good roots coming already. I don't know if you can see that well. And just kind of scoop it into there. Maybe kind of get rid of some of the excess sand. Looks good. Oh yeah, it's gonna love it in here. And just kind of press down the soil around it. Welcome to your new home, little Passionflower. Alright, that looks good in there. I'm going to do the other ones. And just like before, I'm going to gently kind of scoop around the roots and put them into the little hole I dug in this pot. And pat it down. I guess this one, the leaves haven't fully opened yet, but that's okay. They'll open, especially when they see they have a new home. They'll be all excited and they'll open their leaves. Should be good. So I also have this little guy, and he's still in his seed and hasn't really grown yet. But I'm just going to transplant it before the seed gets all moldy and stuff and kills it off. Better to be safe than sorry, I guess. So I'm just going to transplant that one into this pot with the other one as well. Like, I'm sure in the beginning they'll be fine together like this. Obviously once they get bigger I'll have to kind of separate them, but that's okay, it's fine for now, I think. So be very gentle because it's just a baby, very small baby. I'm just gonna kind of make a little hole over here for it. You don't want too much sand because you want it to root better. Make sure the little root part is facing down into the soil so that it has somewhere to attach to. If you can see, it's really small. It'll find its way even if it's kind of on the surface. Okay. And I think that's all of them for now. Like, I guess I'll just kind of fill in these gaps. And I'll just kind of leave this, maybe probably put it in my greenhouse just in case more start to grow. I had this on a heat mat the whole time, and that really helped speed up the germination. Like, after they weren't growing for like 2 months, I just put them on a heat mat, and then a couple weeks later they sprouted, so I think that kind of helped them sprout faster because they're a tropical plant and they like warm conditions. But it's pretty warm in my greenhouse right now, so it should be fine in there. And just kind of, well, it's got extra water, so I'm going to drain this water and just set it aside. And now I'm just going to give them a very light misting just to kind of settle them in. Just kind of settle the roots. And I think they'll like a little bit of that mist because it's a hot day too. They'll be happier now, I think. Okay, so these are transplanted. And now I guess, maybe move on. Well, I should definitely get those those golden berries done as soon as possible. So I think I'll do that next because that's kind of my highest priority right now. Okay, so I already filled these pots up with soil. I'm just using solo cups with holes in the bottom. It's a much cheaper way to go about it. And I already watered the soil so it's nice and wet. And I watered the medium for these golden berries as well. So I think they're ready to transplant. Like obviously there's a lot more in here. Like I think there's probably, I estimate probably around 25 to 30 plants total. Maybe. I think the package came with 30 seeds, so there's probably about 30 plants in here. So I'm going to throw a few extra seeds in with the package. And I only have, what is it, 12 or so cups over here. And so I think I'm just going to plant a couple plants, maybe 2 to 3 plants in each pot for now, because I don't have a whole lot of cups. I still got to do my other plants, so for now I'll just it'll be better than just this plain sand they've been in for a while. So, and once they get bigger I can get more pots or cups or whatever and just plant them in there. So now I'm just going to kind of gently scoop up these plants. Some of the roots might be a little intertwined, but that's okay. It's usually recommended that you don't have a lot of sand with them, I guess, because they need to adapt to the soil eventually. I'm just going to put that one in there. In there. Just gonna do the rest of these. Oops. Just adding 2 to 3 plants per pot. And when you're transplanting, it's actually kind of a good idea, if possible, to pick them up by the leaves, like this, so that you don't damage the stems. Because if you break a stem, then the plant is no good anymore, usually. Like sometimes you can kind of heal them, but it's pretty tricky to do. It's best to just pick them up either by the roots, like if there's a little root ball, or by the leaves. These look like pretty healthy plants. That's cool. There's a baby strawberry plant in here. So I guess this was the same sand I used to start some strawberry seeds in, which really didn't work out for me too well because the seeds, I guess, were too tiny, and you kind of got a bunch of transplant shock, and had a whole whack of them in here, and only, well, this one and these ones were pretty much the only survivors out of that batch. So I planted more strawberries, and they're still pretty small, but I just planted them in regular soil, so see if they do better this time around. Good thing about growing in sand is it also helps develop nice healthy root systems. I don't know if you can see that, but that's a long root for such a little plant. And I don't really know the science behind that, but I guess sand just helps them roots be more healthy somehow by, I don't know, maybe less chance of root rot or whatever, less obstacles for the roots to kind of go around maybe, versus if it was in soil or whatever. So I got about a dozen or so of these left. These pots are already filled up with about 3 in each pot. But I think I might just try to squeeze one more each in these containers, just so I don't have to use more of those pots, because I kind of need them for my tomatillos as well. And I'll probably plant my goji berries in some bigger pots because they're a bigger plant ultimately. So I'm just gonna try squeeze like 4 or so in each pot, just so. And once they get bigger, like they'll be happy for now, but once they get bigger I can always separate them later, kind of thing. Okay, so now I got them all in their little cups, and I counted, I got about 48 of them, 48 plants total, so about 4 plants each pot approximately. So now I'm just going to gently kind of settle them in there, move the soil around them. It's kind of might be a little tricky with more plants in here, but especially when I'm holding the camera. So if I put this down for a moment, I can probably actually do it a little better. There we go. Just like you're transplanting any kind of plant, really. Whether uppotting tomatoes or peppers, or concept's pretty much the same. It's just a little harder since there's more of them in here. So they'll get the nutrients right away pretty much, and they'll be a lot happy that they're in soil, and they'll grow a little bigger. And then once they start to get quite a bit bigger, then I can probably actually transplant a lot of these out into the garden just by gently pulling apart the soil, kind of thing. Pulling apart the roots, I guess. And once you water them, they'll settle in a bit more, and soil will be a bit more even. So I think probably at this point in stage of transplanting, this is probably the most stressful kind of time for the plants. Once they see they're getting food finally from the nutrients from the soil, they'll be a lot more happy after. Stuff like that. Okay, I kind of got these plants all snuggled in here now, and you could see another good use for the sand, having a little bit of sand still in with your plants, is that it helps with drainage. Like, it won't help a whole lot, but it'll just definitely make the soil more free draining. So now I'm just going to give them a nice little drink. And have them on the misting setting, so don't stress them out too much, I guess. It's good to water them in good so that the roots get all settled in there and stuff. Kind of even out the soil, not so rigid. Once you see a little bit of a pool kind of forming, move on to the next. Don't overdo it. Okay. So they'll be kind of pushed over a little bit from the water. That's okay. Just kind of move them back the best you can. They'll recover. Once they get used to being in their new environment. And it looks like my golden berries are finally transplanted. Now that I'm at it, I'm actually going to transplant these couple little strawberry plants that were in with the sand into a separate pot, just so they have somewhere to live. Gotta be quite a bit more delicate with these strawberries because they're so small still. The problem with this using small seeds in sand is that they just don't transplant as well because the plants are usually smaller right off the bat. But these are been in the sand for a long time, and I guess they just recently germinated because I haven't really noticed them before, I don't think. Usually when you're starting seeds in sand, I guess it's recommended that you start with bigger seeds rather than those tiny microscopic strawberry seeds or even mint seeds, I guess. Like, you can do it, but I think you'll get better results if you start those kind of seeds in regular soil. Okay, so they're in there now. Set this aside and gently mix this in, of course, maybe from a distance. Okay. So now I can use this same sand to plant something else in. The sand is good enough, basically an infinite amount of times as long as you have good sand. And I mean enough sand. Alright, so next I'm going to be planting these goji berries, which I actually started in little homemade kind of peat pellets, just made out of newspaper, and some peat-based potting soil in there. If you don't know how to make these, they're pretty much the same concept as making regular newspaper pots, only you use a much smaller kind of jar. Like, I use tiny little essential oils jars to roll these up with. So if you want to know how to make pots kind of like that, I'll leave a link in the description to the video I kind of referenced to make these with. And you can use them for any size pot, really, just you have to have the right size container. So I'm going to be potting these just into these 6-cell kind of pots. It'll be a lot easier because they're already in kind of like a pellet already. So I gotta make kind of a round hole and then just pop them in there kind of. And it'll just give them more room to grow over time. Be a lot happier in here, I think. And of course, once they get bigger, then you can kind of think about transplanting again, kind of separating them, I guess. But right now they're so small, it's really hard to do. So, you see they kind of got roots coming out the bottom already, so means they're ready to be transplanted. Okay. Okay, so now that I got these kind of in the cells here, like some of them are sticking up a little bit and there's gaps between, so just wetted some soil. So I'm just going to kind of fill in the gaps with the soil where I water them in, just so they're more snug in there, I guess. Just like you're working with cement almost, only it's soil. And it's actually good to have them in these little newspaper pots because they'll break down over time and the roots will grow through them and the plant will eventually eat them, and just a good way to get them started, in my opinion, especially if you're starting really small seeds, because goji berry seeds are tiny. And so I actually started these goji berry seeds from saved seeds from some goji berries I just bought at the store. And so goji berries, they have a lot of seeds in them, so you just rip them apart and kind of plant those seeds. And that's what I did, and it obviously worked. It's probably a good idea if your seeds are organic before you plant them, because then they'll have a better chance of actually growing because they haven't been treated with anything. And I guess the age of the berries, freshness, all kind of plays a role in that too. You have fresher berries, your seeds are going to be more viable, I guess. It's okay if you get little chunks of wood or whatever in here. Firms it up a bit, I guess. Okay, now that I got these goji berries kind of all packed in there good, I'm just going to gently mist them from the lowest misting kind of setting, just to settle them in a bit more. I didn't water these peat pellets actually before I transplanted them, so it's good to give them a little watering anyway. So that's probably good. And the goji berries are now planted. Now I was given these containers too, and they still have the labels from the things that used to be planted in there, I guess. But I'm not going to bother to remove them. I pretty well know what these are. Like, a lot of people will say just to kind of label all your seedlings or whatever so you don't forget, but I tend to never forget, and even if I do, I always tend to figure it out. Now I'm going to pot up my petunias, and I'm going to use these pots, which I think are definitely appropriate because they say wave petunias on them, and they're the same color as the flower pretty much, so that'll work. I think I'll just put, I got 2 of them here, so I think I'll just put 3 plants in each pot, and these are probably going to go in the window boxes anyways, so they don't need to be in here all that long, just until it's warm enough to plant them in there, so I'm sure they'll do fine. And this time I'm kind of going to use a spoon because they're a little bigger kind of pots there. Just kind of loosen up the soil a bit so I can kind of fit them in there. Maybe water it a little more. Same over here. Doesn't have to be perfect for now because I'm just gonna kind of mold them into place before I water them in, kind of thing. So these ones I just started in these little yogurt cups. I didn't actually start them in here. I had them in like an egg carton kind of before that, but they weren't doing too well in here, so they were actually almost on the brink of death. And then I transplanted them in here, and now they're doing much better. Like, I'm actually surprised they made it to this point. This one, just kind of press the bottom and the sides. Kind of in there, kind of good. Don't damage the plants. Okay. And then just kind of in there, kind of to the side maybe. I need to fit more over here. This one's going to be next. Okay, so this got a nice root ball kind of forming on. I don't know if you can see it. It's not root bound yet, but it's got nice roots forming. I think it's a good time to transplant them now. Oops, sorry. This one actually has a few plants in it with it. And over here, the same thing. Kind of hard to get out of here. Still want to be gentle with them, as gentle as you can. Just don't damage the plants. Okay, now I'll do the same with this one. Okay, so now that they're in here, I'm just going to do the same thing as the other plants. Kind of mold the soil around them, kind of thing. Good for now, and now I'll do this one. This one's a nice healthy plant. Might just keep them in these pots depending on how they do. Like, I could leave them in here and maybe transplant the whole thing into a bigger pot, but I would like to have some of these in window boxes. They look nice and they do well there when they're transplanted there. Luckily, I didn't damage any of these plants when I was trying to get them out of those yogurt cups. It's pretty good. Now I'm just gonna water them in on the where is it? The mist setting. Even out the soil and kind of settle the roots in there and give them a drink at the same time. Definitely important that your plants stay well hydrated. And it's also important that you stay hydrated as well. Humans, they're just like a plant with complicated emotions, really. Can you see the resemblance? It's actually starting to get pretty windy right now, so it's not really good to transplant seedlings in the wind, because they can break more easily and just be a shock to them once they're being transplanted. So I'm going to move these back inside under my grow light for now, and I think I'll do these tomatillos just a little bit later, and I think that'll be fine. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today and my plants. Hope you enjoyed the lesson about transplanting and just hanging out with me in general, and I do appreciate it. And until next time, happy growing!